Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends of Just Transition, it is my great pleasure on behalf of Commissioners Elisa Ferreira and Kadri Simson to welcome you all to this fourth meeting of the Just Transition platform. A lot has happened since last April when we last met. Very notably, the European climate law came into force in July. And through that, we as Europe committed legally to become climate neutral by 2050 and to reduce carbon emissions by at least 55% already by 2030. Secondly, all the legal elements of the Just Transition mechanism have also been put in place, meaning that we are now equipped to accompany the transition with at least 55 billion of targeted support to the regions most affected. Thirdly, the Commission has also in July put forward proposals in order to concretely organize the reduction of emissions by 2030. This is known as the Fit for 55 package. And of course, last week, we had the latest conference on climate, COP26 in Glasgow. All these elements point to one stark reality: the urgency of action. We need definitely to accelerate the transition in order to meet our targets already by 2030. But in order to do that, we need to put people and communities at the center of our thinking and of our actions. Unfortunately, Commissioner Ferreira could not be with us today, but she has asked me to convey to you 4 key messages on her behalf. The first message is that indeed there is no time to waste. No time to waste to set up the Territorial Just Transition Plans, which will be underpinning our Just Transition action. A lot has already happened on this, but we need to go the last mile. And why so? Because looking at past transitions, the lessons which we can draw is that we have all to gain by getting ahead of the change. Secondly, we need to make sure that territorial just transition plans are comprehensive strategies. What do I mean by that? By that, I mean that the starting point has to be a clear transition trajectory. Secondly, it has to identify fully the economic and social implications of that transition. And thirdly, on that basis, it has to indicate which comprehensive actions will be taken, and that not just under the Just Transition Fund, but also under the 2 other financing pillars of the Just Transition mechanism. Thirdly, for the Just Transition mechanism, and specifically the Just Transition Fund to be effective, it has to come as an additional and specific targeted element to what cohesion policy does in the different regions of Europe. It cannot be seen as something which would warrant in any way a reduction of normal cohesion policy support in those regions. And finally, fourth but essential message, I was talking before about putting people and communities at the center, well, the best way to secure that is to draw them in and to listen to their aspirations, to their ideas on how to shape that transition in the best ways. We need to go for serious, inclusive, participatory processes with the local communities and involving also the young generations, the ones which have the energy, the ones which have an open mind, and the ones which are the most entrepreneurial. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to invite us all to listen to Commissioner Kadri Simson on her own messages to all of us today.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to talk to you today on the next step of the Just Transition platform journey. First of all, let me wish you a very warm welcome to the meeting today. I have always said that phasing out coal will not be easy. We know it is a delicate exercise, balancing considerations of security of supply with affordability and social fairness. And the current context with high energy prices makes things even more challenging. But it also makes it even more urgent to act and reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. At the same time, always present in the overarching context of social fairness and justice. This should be the lens through which we view all of these considerations. So today, in the spirit of looking through that lens, I want to mention three things. Progress made so far, the current energy markets situation, and my takeaways from COP26. So, beginning with the progress made so far in some of our most coal-reliant member states in the past few months. I was delighted to see Romania and Bulgaria starting to discuss a timely coal phase-out. Both countries have agreed to discuss a timeline and technical options with the relevant stakeholders to define the best way forward, one that secures security of supply, affordability and social concerns and complies with EU energy and climate objectives. Romania will work with a timeline to phase out coal by 2032 and Bulgaria towards the end of the 2030 decade. These processes will be supported by the EU recovery package. I would also like to commend Croatia and Slovenia on adopting a coal phase-out date, 2033. The date requires early planning to make sure that Croatia and Slovenia are ready in time. I understand that Czechia will soon follow. Discussions are also continuing in Poland, where the challenge is, of course, of a greater nature. I was very happy to see the Polish government sign up to the COP26 statement about phasing out coal in the 2030s or shortly thereafter. This means that, as of now, there is not a single EU country that has not yet started to reflect on the phase-out of coal. Most have already adopted a concrete phase-out plan. This is very positive news. It also reflects the rapid pace of progress on the ground. In our coal regions, increase in Spain, in Czechia and in Poland, where we see a real willingness to come together in a constructive way and propose concrete solutions for a gradually coal-free future. At the EU level, things are moving fast as well. Over the summer, the Commission released a comprehensive package of new laws, initiatives and instruments to implement the Green Deal. Just transition is at the center of this package. First, we have proposed to upgrade our energy efficiency and clean energy legislation to adapt it to our new level of ambition. That means greater protection for our most vulnerable consumers and those in energy poverty. We have proposed a new instrument, the Social Climate Fund. This fund will use the future revenue from carbon pricing to provide support to vulnerable consumers and micro-enterprises for building renovations, access to clean transport, and when needed, temporary direct income support. This new instrument would kick in just in time to take the relay of EU-supported recovery programs, which will start phasing out by 2025. Finally, the Commission is now working on a set of recommendations on the social and labour effects of the transition. We aim to publish these recommendations by the end of the year. They will serve as guidance to Member States, notably on how to anticipate and accompany change in the skills of our workforce and how to modernise our social systems. The second topic I want to touch upon is the current situation on the energy markets. I hear some say that it calls for a pause in the green transition. Let me be clear, it does not. Rolling out clean energy and reducing our reliance on fossil fuels is the best way to protect ourselves from such external shocks. We have to help most vulnerable consumers pay their energy bills this winter. The Commission is fully aware of this. This is why, a month ago, we published a toolbox that identifies short-term fixes and possible medium to long-term measures to mitigate risk in the future. Third and finally, some reflections on COP26. From what I witnessed in Glasgow, a fair and just transition was high on the negotiation agenda and front of mind for many. While there, the EU endorsed a statement on the phase-out of coal, by which we committed to a coal-free energy mix in the 2030s or shortly thereafter. This also calls on us to plan the transition with an increased sense of urgency. We can only ensure a just transition if we do the transition in time. A rushed transition will not be a fair one. The EU also signed a political declaration on the importance to step up action on just transition globally in our cooperation programs with third countries. Europe cannot push for it alone. The just transition is a powerful catalyst, and we will reinforce its support to third countries. We have signed up a partnership with South Africa, along with France, Germany, the United States and the UK. Together, we will mobilise up to $8.5 billion. We will boost exchanges with third countries under the Just Transition Platform and in meetings like this one. First, beginning with coal regions, where we have the most major experience, but our intention is to also cover carbon-intensive regions in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I have given you a flavour today of where we are coming from, where we are, and where we are going when it comes to the just transition. Thank you very much for your relentless efforts and continued commitment. I wish you a productive event and inspiring conversations.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Balbina Gluza and I'm working in DG Regio on Just Transition with special focus on Just Transition Platform. Today, I have a pleasure to be here in studio with my Director General, Marc Lemaître, and with you, dear participants, online. And I'm here to ask questions to Marc. These questions were submitted by some of you in advance before the Just Transition Platform event by email. But now you have also opportunity to put your questions online via the live chat box in Swapcard. So please do so. And if you have any questions you always wanted to ask on Just Transition platform and Just Transition process, please feel free now to ask them. This is the great opportunity. And we can also challenge a bit Marc with our questions. So let's start with the first questions we have received. The first question is from one participant. I have heard from some that the JTF is like a Yeti. Everyone has heard about it, but no one has seen it. Do you agree, Marc, with this tricky question? Have you seen Yeti?
Well, thank you for this first challenge, Balbina. I would like it to be like this. I am not sure that as of today, everyone has heard about the Just Transition Fund and the Just Transition mechanism. But I certainly count on everyone and certainly on the participants of the Just Transition platforms to convey this message that the EU is very, very much focused on ensuring that our climate ambitions are going hand in hand with ensuring that everyone receives the right support for that transition. But beyond that, I certainly believe that, yes, there is still quite a bit to do in order to move from this vision we have to reality on the ground, to really making a difference, to really ensuring that people are helped, that communities are helped to shape the transition and to go through it in the best possible way. And here I would repeat my message. We really need to accelerate the putting into place of the elements of the Just Transition mechanism, first and foremost, the Territorial Just Transition Plans. There is some movement on this. We have received 2 Territorial Just Transition Plans by now, which we are examining as we speak. But overall, we are expecting more than 40 of them. So there is clearly quite a way to go. I do hope that with the technical support that has been offered over this year, we will be able together to very quickly have these Territorial Just Transition Plans in place and to launch concrete support actions in the selected regions.
Thank you, Marc. Very useful clarifications. The next question is about the updates which Commissioner Simson shared about the coal phase-out in different member states. I wanted to ask you how important this is for the programming of the Just Transition Fund.
Well, first, I have been very positively surprised by the information shared by Commissioner Simson. I must say that I was not aware that so many additional member states had become quite concrete on defining for themselves a date of final exit from coal production. This is excellent news, and this is essential news. For coal-producing regions, very clearly, one element of the contract between, on the one hand, European taxpayers and on the other, coal-producing regions is that support from the Just Transition mechanism and specifically from the Just Transition Fund must be accompanied by a clear step in the direction of moving out of coal production. And this is why this news shared by Commissioner Simson is so welcome. We seem to see now that part of the quid pro quo to be fulfilled by member states. And again, this should be inscribed in the Territorial Just Transition Plans. And this is then the sound basis on which to roll out Just Transition Fund support.
Thank you. But we also heard that some member states want to achieve the climate neutrality at its own pace. Do you think it's enough?
What is absolutely clear is that the EU is not dictating final exit dates, notably for coal production. And this, I think, is abundantly illustrated by the diversity of the dates which have been mentioned by Commissioner Simson. But certainly, there is one common element which all member states have subscribed to, and that is the European climate law I have referred to. We have there two very clear aims, one for 2030, one for 2050, and there will be one for 2040 still to be determined. What is obvious is that these two aims for 2030 and 2050 cannot be achieved if some member states were to suggest, for instance, that they would wait before they would take any action. So the overall framework and the overall collective ambition which member states have all subscribed to has, of course, also to be taken into account. But again, from the dates and specific years we have heard mentioned by Commissioner Simson, I think that this is a welcome confirmation that all member states are in fact taking these collective commitments very seriously and are willing to contribute to achieving them.
Thank you. I think it was very clear. Actually, we have already in the chat questions related to this part. I will couple these by asking if the transition should not be rushed. Why does part of the JTF need to be committed by end of 2023?
Who said that the transition should not be rushed? I would certainly repeat that today we are not pursuing the climate transition at a pace which is required to achieve our 2030 goals. We have just increased our ambition for 2030. We had until now aimed for minus 40%. Now we aim for minus 55%. Have we drawn all the consequences of that increased goal? Not yet. And this is why the Commission has put on the table a comprehensive package in order to secure achieving this minus 55% goal. What is obvious to me, and I assume to everyone, is that we do need to accelerate. We do need to raise our game. And there again, I would just call on not forgetting the hard lessons of the past. When we were not prepared for some structural, profound change in one or the other of our industries. Take textiles, take shipbuilding, take even steel. Well, this led to very, very serious and damaging social consequences. So the lesson is clear. We need to be on the ball early. We need to be ahead of the curve. We need to anticipate on these changes. And let's go back, taking these exit dates, which member states are now individually contemplating. I mean, all those specific years, they are tomorrow. And this is why really we have to mobilize as fast as we can the Just Transition Fund, and beyond that, the Just Transition Mechanism means these minimum 55 billion I have talked about, as fast as we can. This is, I think, a collective responsibility which everyone, I am sure, is taking very, very seriously. I mean, next to that, there is something which today might sound like a bit like a detail, but which should also make us, for a financial reason, concentrate on action as fast as possible. And it is that indeed, more than half of the Just Transition Fund means will have to be deployed before mid-2026. And this is not even tomorrow. This is really today. So there is really no time to lose. I think both if we care about making a positive difference for the communities most concerned, but also if we care about mobilizing all the means which are put at the disposal through the EU budget.
Thank you, Marc. And speaking about no time to lose, we got a question linked to that. Should the Jtf continue after 2030?
Well, this is certainly not for me to decide. This is something which we will have to contemplate as the European Commission when we will be designing proposals for the EU budget beyond 2027. But certainly there is one point I would want to make. The transition will not be over, neither by 2027 nor by 2030. There will be a lot ahead of us when we are at that time. And certainly we will not at that point in time have overcome all the economic and social challenges related to transition. Now, what should therefore be our collective ambition? Our collective ambition should be to demonstrate between now and the time when the Commission has to make proposals on the future that yes, the Just Transition Fund and the Just Transition Mechanism are an appropriate tool, an effective tool, one which brings exactly the results which we are dreaming of. And this, once more, suggests that we need action, and we need action very fast in order to have a compelling case for continuing the Just Transition Fund.
Thank you very much, Mark. And now I wanted to ask questions which were submitted before to us. As we know, the JTF will not only support coal regions, but also carbon-intensive regions. And this afternoon, we will launch 4 new working groups on this topic. I wanted to ask you why these groups are important, actually. Why do we do it?
I think it is important to recognize that when focusing on just transition, our first angle was to look specifically at coal-producing regions and at also regions producing other fossil fuels like oil shale, because it was obvious from the start that a lot of change was coming to those regions. And it is only somewhat later that we have woken up to what the climate transition would mean for carbon-intensive industries, as they are called. And these carbon-intensive industries are also concentrated in certain parts of the EU territory. And when it comes to carbon-intensive industries, there are certainly 2 dimensions to it. One is that there is a technological challenge. In order to transform these industries, to decarbonize these industries to such an extent that they would have a sustainable future. And here, of course, we can think for certain of them either of a full electrification of their processes or of switching to a fuel which would be, for instance, green hydrogen. Having mentioned this, it is clear that today we don't yet have off-the-shelf ready-made solutions of this type, and therefore focusing on the fast-evolving landscape on carbon reducing technologies is very important. But then there is also this second dimension, which is the human dimension, not only for coal-producing regions, but also for carbon-intensive regions. And here, the 4 working groups that we are kickstarting through this meeting of the Just Transition platform should be also allowing, enabling the right interaction with notably the main stakeholders, representatives of workers in those industries. And here we are talking mainly, and the 4 working groups specificities demonstrate that of the steel sector, of the chemical sector, and also, I forgot the last one now.
Horizontal stakeholders.
No, wait, there's a third.
Chemicals, steel, and cement.
And cement, of course. How could I forget?
Yes, thank you, Mark. Indeed, we will have also a session officially launching these 4 working groups just directly after our opening session. I will come to that a bit later during our meeting. But when we are speaking now about the agenda, I wanted to ask you why actually we are including a session on transatlantic dialogue in the event?
Well, as Europeans, we like to believe that we have a more sensitive social chord, that we are the ones at the forefront of reflections on social justice. And with the Just Transition, we are in the middle of that, obviously. Well, without downplaying what I believe is indeed at the core of our European social market economy model, still we should also remain open to learn from others how they approach the social dimension of climate action and of transition. And this is why we thought it was important to start a dialogue with partners from the United States and partners from Canada. They will be facing similar challenges to ours. We were talking about coal. We were talking about carbon-intensive industries. We have today very similar economic structures on both sides of the Atlantic from that point of view. And therefore, this is an opportunity to learn from each other what our present state of thinking is and to enrich each other's views.
Thank you. I agree that the transatlantic dialogue is also crucial, but let's maybe check also the questions in the chat now, because I see that it's very lively. And we have a question on territorial just transition plans. So back to our member states. Who is in charge of elaborating the territorial just transition plans? It would seem logical that for place-based plans, local and regional governments be on the driving seat to set up these plans.
I would agree. Sorry?
Me too.
Where, of course, the administrative structures within the member states allow for that. I say this because there are significant differences in the level of decentralization of economic policy making, and in particular of deciding on investments, public investments, of deciding on support to private enterprise, of deciding on support for skilling, reskilling, upskilling of the labor force. And all this, of course, should be taken into account in order to ensure that just transition means would be handled most effectively. But independently of state structures, what is obvious, and that brings me back to one of the key messages of Commissioner Ferreira, is that territorial just transition plans should not be developed in an ivory tower somewhere in a state capital. The pen holder can be in the capital, depending again on the administrative structure, but the pen holder must be in dialogue with the regions concerned. And this is for sure the public authorities in those regions, which can be municipalities, which can be regions as such, And this must be as well the stakeholders in those regions, representing employers' organizations, representing workers' organizations, representing civil society organizations, and as I said, also representing the young generations in those territories. Where the administrative structures allow, of course, we are pushing for the entrusting of Just Transition Fund means and of the design of territorial just transition plans at the territorial level. But let us not forget either, we were talking about exit dates for coal production. These are decisions which are always taken at national level, and therefore territorial just transition plans also require, because they need to be in sync with the overall transition strategy of a member state, they require to have the right coherence with these national objectives, which are set at national level.
Thank you, Mark. Actually, I have a question linked to that, what you said about the stakeholder engagement at different levels. It's coming from one participant and sent beforehand. And the question is as follows. The Executive Vice President Timmermans said that the European Green Deal is going to be just, or there is just not going to be a European Green Deal. Making a just transition without winning workers' support seems improbable. Does the Commission plan to include workers' co-determination and other forms of workers' participation at company level in the European Green Deal to institutionally strengthen workers' voice in the process?
I already emphasized how important it is to have a participatory process to shape the use which is being made of Just Transition Fund means. And this very centrally requires the involvement of representatives of workers. And certainly depending on the types of regions we are talking about, we of course expect workers of the most concerned sectors in those regions to be well represented and heard in that context. The question you put seems to be also looking at decisions which individual companies are facing on how to adjust to our climate agenda. Here, I do think that we have very strong European legislation which ensures that, especially for large companies, and we are talking in those carbon-intensive sectors, mostly of large companies, fundamental strategic decisions which are being taken require some form of consultation of staff. Now, we do not intend to change this, but I think that this is one of the lessons which we have drawn at European level from the past. I was mentioning some transitions which have been more traumatic. It is following one massive layoff plan, which was decided by Renault, if I remember well, at the end of the 1990s or beginning of the 2000s, which in fact led to the latest European legislation in that context to ensure that workers are consulted before fundamental decisions at the level of individual companies.
Thank you, Marc. I hope you still have power to reply for next questions, because there is a wave coming. Next question from the chat. Is there any thinking of extending the JTP to other affected territories and sectors that were not foreseen by the JTF regulation? For instance, the automotive sector. What would you say to that?
The question, if I understood it correctly, is about the Just Transition platform and for which topics it should open its arms. As we could recall through the different questions put, the Just Transition platform is not cast in stone. And we are enlarging its remit now with the transatlantic dialogue, with the 4 working groups we have referred to. And I would certainly reassure that this openness is not a one-off, and we will continue to look at legitimate themes which would benefit from discussions in a framework like the one of the Just Transition platform. And the automotive industry undoubtedly is one industry which is not necessarily itself today very carbon intensive. If one neglects the emissions of the inputs to produce cars, like steel, so that we address more directly. But certainly the car industry faces a technological challenge in order to ensure that the cars produced are indeed sustainable in the future. So here I would conclude that the car industry is certainly one obvious candidate for further enlargement of the portfolio of industries which are being looked at and discussed within the Just Transition platform.
I absolutely agree, and we will do our best. And next question is on gas. You were speaking about coherent transition strategies before. Some countries are still investing in natural gas in the 2014-2020 programs. Is this in line with the overall logic?
Well, let me start again by saying that Brussels is not deciding on everything. And when it comes to energy security and the energy mix of member states, we are not dictating that. What we are ensuring, but through collective decisions, is that we reach our targets for 2030 and eventually for 2050. Now, if we look at 2050, obviously gas being a fossil fuel, like many others, while being less carbon intensive than coal, also has its days counted in the way we know it today. But when it comes to securing an energy transition between now and 2050 and a pathway to climate neutrality, we are not dictating in the details how this should be shaped by member states. And this, I think, is also demonstrated by the fact that we will continue on a transitional basis to support, to allow for European support to investments in gas infrastructure. Although we will be looking for a future-proof type of investment, for instance, which would allow for the replacement of gas by hydrogen in the infrastructure put in place. So this will be possible beyond the 14-20 period, with undoubtedly financial support running at least until 2025 or even slightly beyond. So this demonstrates, I think, that at European level, we are, again, not dictating to member states exactly what decisions to take on their pathway or on their short to medium term energy mix. And we are also recognizing that gas has a role to play for still quite a number of years in the future.
Thank you, Marc. I think it was very clear. We have one more question on the Territorial Just Transition Plans. What is the approval negotiation process of Territorial Just Transition Plans between the Member State and the European Commission to be followed? How does it transpire, and is there any specific timeline, deadlines?
Well, let me start with the end. There is no clear deadline, but there is a very fast ticking clock. I already emphasized that, and I will just repeat that as Territorial Just Transition Plans are the absolute precondition for support under the Just Transition Fund, and as more than half of the support under the Just Transition Fund has to be mobilized before mid-2026, there is clearly an implicit timeline for the adoption of those Territorial Just Transition Plans. Our hope is that with the technical support which was offered this year and which was taken up by a large majority of member states, we are very close now to mature Territorial Just Transition Plans. But I would want again to emphasize that these Territorial Just Transition Plans have to be comprehensive. They have to start from the transition goals of a member state, so the decarbonization pathway, which they have decided upon. It has to include a clear analysis of the expected economic and social impact on the territories which would be targeted, and it has from there to define a convincing intervention logic in order to cushion off these economic and social impacts. All this is essential, and I would even add to that that it is not just about the Just Transition Fund, but it is also about the two other pillars of the Just Transition mechanism. So also what would be contemplated, for instance, under the public sector loan facility should be explicited in the Territorial Just Transition Plans. But I do hope that with the support we have offered, most member states are by now very close to submitting to us a complete draft of these Territorial Just Transition Plans. And we will be assessing and moving towards approval of these plans exactly in the same way as we do on cohesion policy programs generally, i.e., if we see shortcomings, we will be sending observations to the member states concerned, which hopefully would then lead to rapid improvements on the contents, and that would allow then us to adopt these plans.
Unfortunately, now we will have to wrap up this session. Thank you very much for this useful exchange, Marc. And I would like to invite all participants to the next session of the Just Transition platform, which will start in around 30 minutes. So at 2:30, we will have two sessions which will start in parallel. The session launching the Just Transition platform working groups on carbon-intensive regions. And then the other session will be on coal regions in transition, updates on the initiative. So please grab your coffee and stay with us. Thank you.